Hello, this is 9 to 5, a financial independence podcast where we focus more on the retire early side of FIRE. I'm Josh. I retired, I hate that word, at 48 after 25 years in the corporate world. I'm joined by my co-host Elliot, who is near the end of full-time employment as well. We share our paths to early retirement, challenges that we've faced, and what life looks like on the other side, including struggles and opportunities that life keeps throwing our way. We're an ad-free podcast, but if you would like to support us in any way, we have links in the show notes and video description for books and other products that we use and love. Thanks for tuning in. Let's kick it to the episode.
Hey Josh, how's it going?
Not too bad, Elliot. How about you?
Oh, just another wonderful day in paradise here in good old warm St. Louis. I think when I was walking my daughter to school, I'm one of those very strange birds that I don't habitually check the weather. No shame to anybody that does. I know that you and I know somebody that does, but that was not intended to be a comment on anyone that does. However, yeah, no, it's a bit chilly here.
You can call her out on it. You're probably talking about my wife. She is a nerd when it comes to the weather. I joked with her yesterday about it because I'm like, you just looked at the forecast on your phone and now you're watching the news to see if they're going to say something different.
Hey, as they say about St. Louis weather, if you don't like it, just wait, right? So It is a perpetually changing thing, but it is starting to feel like winter around the parts.
Yep.
But nevertheless, it was nice to get in a nice brisk walk this morning.
I bet. Yeah. Got the blood flowing. Makes you feel alive.
That's right. Well, I know we talked about this topic a little bit on one of our previous episodes about wanting to do kind of a year-end review and seeing how our money kind of played out for the year. I know especially for myself, as I inch closer to retirement, I think it's important for me to keep an eye on the numbers. And obviously for you on the other side, it's a whole different, exercise in managing, hey, I don't know, are you worried about sequence of returns risk? And so are you constantly checking, hey, can I spend 4%? Do I need to reduce it to 3.3 or, 2.5 or should I be spending 7, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I will just say now that I haven't worried about any of that stuff. This was a very good exercise for me and one that Lori and I need to put into our monthly practice because I think we're both a little bit in the dark. We have a really good idea of what our spending is because at a very high level, majority of things go on the credit card and then able to pay those off every month with her net income. And we've rarely ran into a situation where we have had to carry anything over and everything just gets paid. So we haven't really paid a ton of attention to it, and except for a little bit more closely during Q4, whenever I was doing that little challenge where I was trying to find all the little money leaks and monthly expenses that we could cut. But other than that, we didn't know how much we were spending in specific categories. So this has been a little bit eye-opening to us.
It's always enlightening, I think, from my point of view, is to take a magnifying glass and really see how did things shake out. I do it pretty religiously on the month, but when you take a wider view and look at the year-long view, what does it actually look like? Anything before we dive in?
I don't think so. I'm looking forward to learning from you and seeing what your process is, and hopefully it's helpful for the listeners as well. And maybe there's something that you can take away from mine as well, even though mine's a little sloppy at this point. It could even be something that maybe we do this exercise with some sort of frequency just to continue to hold each other accountable, which is what we talk about a lot, it seems like, on this podcast, is just being accountability buddies for each other.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll go from there.
While you're doing that, I guess I'll just mention that we always have these available on YouTube, which we'll certainly talk to the information that we have here. But if you're following along and would like to see the numbers, we will have these videos up on our YouTube channel as well.
So, drum roll. Maybe I'll start with the actual numbers. I'll give the caveat of there is a little element of fuzzy math to all of this because some of this is talking about pre-tax, some of this is talking about post-tax, includes company match. So just want to put that out there that it's certainly not perfect. I know that, but hopefully over time it will get more refined. But as far as post-tax income for our family this year, not including taxes for my wife's business, $215,778. Then had expenses of just north of 92,000. And then I actually broke this out to actual versus theoretical because right in the grand scheme of things, and I'll show it right here, you should be able to just take income minus expenses and get what your savings is. And theoretically, you're saving all of that money. What I actually did here in this example was I broke out each one of my accounts and looked for contributions broken out by month to say, what did I actually contribute to these accounts and what did that sum up to? The savings rate is merely your amount of savings in the numerator divided by your income. So in this example, I used the post-tax income. So 56 in actual savings versus the theoretical of 57 and a quarter. I was pretty darn happy with that.
I
I don't
bet.
know.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
good.
the fact that, like you said, as far as quote unquote leaks, that's pretty good. If we're not, I mean, what? That's $1,500. That was the difference.
And just to mention, I guess, as far as your family size, you're a family of five, three small kids, and there's plenty of expenses, or there are generally plenty of expenses there for young children. I know that you've performed this exercise in several years, over the last several years. How does this year stack, our 2025 stack up compared to previous years? Any significant increase or decrease there?
Yeah, so that's a good call out. My kids have gotten older. Inflation is real. And yes, I think we've had some lumpy expenses, not to mention that we've changed how we really live our life, right? Is something that we as a family, I know that you've talked about your family's practice of really kind of having an anti-budget and not really budgeting per se. I would say that we generally follow into that same category, but because I'm a crazy spreadsheet person, there is in my numbers here theoretically a budget that I've just tried to look at historical averages and say, yeah, hey, this is actually what our costs in groceries came out to be, but we budgeted 700. Well, hey, maybe conversely, we said that we were only going to budget 450 a month to restaurants, and lo and behold, here's a leak. So take of that what you will. So we don't strictly keep to those budgets and especially those categories per se, but I do track all of the data that comes along with it, with kind of everything that I was showing in that other tab. So we break down the expense from whether we consider it necessary or discretionary. So you can see the ones listed here. Discretionary, like we pay somebody to cut our lawn. We certainly don't have to go out to restaurants. Maybe entertainment. I mean, truly, if we were hard up for cash, we could slash the entertainment budget. Clothing, shopping, so on and so forth. Some of these things I would say aren't necessarily discretionary or are on the fringe, right? And home improvement's kind of weird because I won't. So I'm using a template that was available on the web, and I've customized it for my own purposes. But they broke out home maintenance versus home improvement. Well, that's all well and good, and theoretically, I agree, but am I going to go to my Home Depot receipt and say, "Oh, well, hey, this was home maintenance versus this was home improvement," and split out each receipt?
Yep.
I certainly don't do that. Um, so put it into a bucket and generally just make these things directionally accurate. I
Hmm.
mean, I think you're going to have diminishing returns the more that you go into each of these things. But another thing that, just generally we would say this still falls into the discretionary. I'm not sure why they broke it out to a whole nother column, but gifts, charity giving, holiday giving, travel, business expenses, etc. So normally, like, we wouldn't have business expenses that fall into our personal spending or anything like that, but maybe we do. So making sure that we recharacterize that when we go back to, yeah, hey, this should have been over here or
Hmm.
whatever. But I know a big change for us this year. So if right, to go back to your question of how did we compare this year versus last year? Last year, like you said, I we purchased a car, the Tesla. I think it was like $38,000 before any credits and whatever else. So yeah, that's a large one-time expense, or one-time expense that doesn't come up every single year, right? Comes up on some frequency for each individual family person. But something that we did this year that was very different was travel. So travel has always been a part of our life, but we had this trip where we went for 5 weeks to Europe. And so, along with that, tried to budget as best we could. So, I think we allocated 12,000 to travel this year. And actually, lo and behold, we had some kind of snafus in our return flights, and we ended up getting credited for a lot of the airfare. So we actually got a drastic reduction in what the overall cost was, just by and large to luck, right? So yeah, I don't know if that really provides the level of insight that we're looking for, but by and large, 92,000, that's really pretty close to what we thought that we would spend this year, was right around 90K. We know going into 2026 in the fall, all of our kids will be kindergarten and up, so we know that the expense for pre-K is going to disappear. That's multiple thousands of dollars. I think it's like 6K, so already that's slashing this budget by, hopefully going down to 85, 84. And I wouldn't say that we kept a super tight rein on what our spending was. We just kind of let things happen. Now, if you ask Dawn, I'm not sure she shares that opinion. I mean, I think as we have gotten closer to the potential decision of me choosing to leave work, is how we have addressed things like home improvement and, maybe things that certainly are not necessary, but more nice to haves if we see ourselves in this house long term, and, you know, things that we may want to address before we leave the big shovel behind, preferably. So,
Well, cool. Yeah.
what do you
So
think?
sounds like you're pretty happy with your results, and I like the detail that you have there. I guess the only other question that I would have is from a individual expenses categories, was there any significant ones? You mentioned the dining out, but was there anything else that you said historically or previously you were looking at, here's what I think I'm going to spend, and then you either over exceeded that or you came in well under? Were there any other surprises in those individual categories?
Yeah, I would say that I haven't done a deep dive on that quite yet. I think that is maybe a shortcoming in in my process right now, is that I haven't, let's say, in previous iterations of burying myself in spreadsheets, right? I had more of that nuance and detail. I know you know this, but hey, I use a bunch of different tools. I subscribe to Monarch Money. I've got Projection Lab. I'm doing stuff in individual spreadsheets. None of this is. I still find myself asking what I perceive as fairly basic level questions that aren't really answered here. So, like maybe somebody watching this, right, is saying, well, if you've got Monarch Money, why in the world are you using spreadsheets, right? I think that's a fairly justifiable question. Is what I have found out through my experience is similar to, when I used personal capital in the past or any of these that are trying to automate the connection with any number of accounts or platforms, etc. I mean, you can see from the list right here, right? I've got a brokerage account, I've got a traditional IRA, I've got a Roth IRA, I've got a high yield savings account, I've got three 529s for my kids. My wife has a traditional IRA, an inherited IRA, a Roth IRA, so on and so forth. There's so many different places which you have to just go to get the answers that the middleware layer in between isn't isn't always the best. I think is the short answer, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily on the middleware or if it's on the institution that I use or any number of technical reasons why, right? But ultimately, it just doesn't give me all the information. Like, for example, maybe I'm doing something incorrect in Monarch, but Monarch is also capturing the flows from my paycheck that actually hit my bank account. And so that's all in a post tax view, right? And so anything that I'm doing pre tax, i.e., my 401k contribution, which you can see here, right, is sizable. $23,500 never hits my bank account. I mean, it's going straight from my check before it's issued to my bank, and it's going directly to my custodian of my 401k. The same way that it's not capturing, hey, how much is my company actually matching that contribution? And that's significant in another $17,000. So it just finds the answer is there's probably no perfect product, which is why I'm back in my back in my spreadsheet here. But that's why I do what I do, I guess.
Yeah, and I would say I think that's why I probably haven't spent the money to invest in any of those programs is because I know there are shortcomings. And I guess that in addition to I just really haven't worried about it too much to have that level of granularity where I thought that it was going to be worth it to invest in one of those. I do still use Empower, but I don't necessarily use it for the expense tracking functionality that it offers. But I think it does all the automated categorization, and it probably needs some level of tweaking and adjusting as you go through and review, and it probably learns a little bit of that as you make those changes. But I don't know. Like you said earlier, going back to the home maintenance versus home improvement, when you start slicing and dicing to, it's like, what value are we actually going to gain from looking at it very closely in the individual in some of those individual categories? More so, I think for me, it's more important to see like the really big ones and whether or not it was a major surprise or, one way or another. And then be able to say, oh yeah, this is something that I could easily cut back on or give up if I so choose, if things go sideways or whatever.
Right. And I will say that I kind of do that at a monthly level. So I do grab, transactions directly from my particular, it's actually just an export out of Monarch. So that is something that it does very well is, hey, it's got all the transactions, breaks it down to what account it went to, so I don't have to go to, you know, play the credit card hacking game. I don't have to go to all my different cards and get statements and say, oh, hey, it was here and there and whatever else. I can just get an Excel export out of there. And then I've got my characterization of what are those types of transactions, and then I have put that kind of faux budget versus what was the actual, so that I can see on a percentage like, yeah, hey, is this in line with what I expected, or like did we really miss the mark here? So like, why was my trash bill $68 as opposed to 21.78? Like maybe that is like we switched credit card bill, or like what credit card was on file, and so
Mhm.
it missed a payment and it's just catching back up. Or maybe it's like, I know water is on a quarterly basis, and so yeah, hey, it's been, we've said what the average is for a month, but because it only happens every quarter, then hey, this number is different and is going to show that difference. So I've done some of that as much as I can without putting too much into that. But
Mhm.
I mean, I think directionally, like what you're saying is, yeah, hey, if normally my discretionary expenses are in the range of 4,500, and then all of a sudden it's like 6,000. Okay, well, like what happened here?
Mhm.
And try and get into the weeds a little bit more.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to do it when you have somewhat of an expectation in mind, or, well, on a sheet here, that you can then say, okay, over the last period of time, it was in this range. I'm going to call that my average. And then you're looking at the outliers. That's a pretty smart way to handle it.
So yeah, I mean the only other thing that I did here was call out, yeah, like all of these potential buckets that we put our savings into. If there was a certain IRS limit, did we have basically room that we could have put more into to essentially optimize for taxes? That's really all it comes down to. And like randomly, I don't know what happened here, but only put in 69, 99, 98 as opposed to a full 7 grand. Okay,
Hmm.
I missed my 2 pennies, but yeah, I think by and large was what was expected. And I realized as I was looking at this, maybe the only thing that isn't captured on here is, as part of my compensation at work, I have been granted RSUs, or restricted stock units, in the past. Those do have a vesting period of 3 years. So I find out about the amount. And if I receive an RSU mid February, and so those mature on March 1st of the following year. So that's why in the past I had talked about March 1st being that important date for me, is because I'll have another tranche of RSUs that'll mature. So theoretically, if I did a good job this past year, I'll get another RSU grant, and that would also, 1/3 of that would mature March 1st of 2027.
Very good.
Now, so with that, I think I'll turn it over to you, Josh.
All right. Sounds good. I'll share my screen here. Okay, I will start here as just a like an introduction to what I kind of estimated our spending would be. I won't go through all the details here, but this was something that I put together back in probably sometime in 2024 when I was nearing the end of full-time employment, and I knew that my wife was still going to be working full-time. So her estimated full-time pay, her net income was going to be just under 50,000, and that's with her still contributing to her 401k. I didn't have all that broken out, but this was just trying to simplify it. And then we listed all of our fixed and variable expenses, and this kind of falls into the same category that you mentioned earlier. You had your discretionary and non-discretionary, but some of ours are more on that fixed side of things, and then some of those, like gas and groceries and repairs and maintenance, makes things a little bit lumpy. But I estimated that we would be spending somewhere in the neighborhood of like 72,000 a year. Any
Can you
question?
can you zoom in a little bit?
Sure. Your old eyes can't see this, Elliot.
Yes, as my optometrist told me, like once you approach 40, those eyes don't work quite so well anymore.
Very
So
true.
total spending annual of 71K. So
That was my projection.
that was your projection.
Yep.
And your actual was that's
Yeah.
the 31 plus the
Nope, that's
39.
just the projection on
Okay.
this
Okay.
tab here. I'm gonna have to click over to
Okay.
the other one
Okay.
and pull
I'm
it
with you.
up. So here is what we actually did, and have a nice little pie chart up at the top here.
Yeah, that's what I used to do as well.
I had four credit cards that we used last year that did, like, kind of like you said, it's not perfect, it's directionally correct. We didn't do all of our spending from credit card. There was still some items that came directly out of our checking account, and maybe that's something that we can touch on in just a minute because I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on some of these things. But we had four major credit cards that I went in and I looked at the year of 2025 summary, pulled that out into all the individual categories that were already created by Chase because they were all Chase cards. And this is what we came up with. So our most expensive category, we're a family of about two and a half. It's me and my wife, and then we have our 20-year-old son who's mostly responsible for his expenses. But for groceries ended up being our largest category. And I said no surprise here, but I think there may still have been a little bit of surprise in that we spent just under $12,000, $1,000 a month, but it does lump in a lot of the like household stuff. So it's not just food, it's other things that we need for the home, and those things that you pick up at Walmart or Target or wherever that might be, it just kind of all gets lumped into the grocery category.
Yeah, I would agree with that for ourselves too. Is I just kind of lump all of that into shopping, and so it makes shopping look astronomical. But we should probably do some better characterization of that. But it's
Yeah.
difficult because it's the exact same thing as that whole home improvement versus home maintenance. You like you don't want to split a receipt to be like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, this is this category versus this category.
Yep. Our next highest category was travel, and this is one that I think I was pretty proud that it was this high because I knew, or at this amount, I shouldn't say this high, but at this amount, because we took 12 to 13 trips, I kind of lost count. I went back before we got together today and was trying to figure out exactly how many trips we went on last year. We traveled a lot. It was the most I think that we had ever traveled in a year, and some of them were short weekend trips, but the majority of them were a week long. So we did, or more than that. So we did a lot. But this $12,000 also included things like parking, rideshare, car rental, just those kind of things. And even though we do as much credit card hacking as we possibly can, we don't stay in hotels all that often. We do a lot of Airbnbs and things like that. So that's what this category was. It doesn't include the entertainment and food that are a part of those trips. Those fall into
Yeah,
the
that
individual categories.
I was going to ask exactly that is we tend to characterize anything that kind of is out of the ordinary with those particular trips, like you said, the entertainment, the food, etc. We have also bucketed that into kind of that travel budget. But yeah, makes sense.
Food and drink was one of those that was a bit of a surprise, and that it came in at 10,000, just under 10,500, and 16% of our total spending. So 293 transactions fell into this category, and I did spot check a lot of this just to see if there was anything that was being miscategorized, and there wasn't. So if you were to have asked me prior to this how much we spent, I probably would have came in at half that, maybe 6,000 or so. And I even asked Lori before we got together. I said, "How much do you think we spent on eating out?" And she said, "I don't know, 8." And I was like, "It was close to 11." So that was a big one for us. But honestly, when you look at our total spending, which I'll get to in just a minute, I mean, this is definitely discretionary, like you said it was for you. But at the point that we are at in our lives now, with we don't have a mortgage, we don't have car payments, we can splurge in this category. We don't eat a lot of fast food. So when we do go out to eat, it's generally for a sit down restaurant. We do enjoy going to breweries. Those costs, as we know, have gone up. I don't remember if I was talking to you or somebody else, but you can't hardly get into go somewhere for a dinner for two and a beer or two each for less than like $70 now. So overall, there were some small purchases in here, so that brought the overall average of each transaction down to $35. But still, if this was an area that we were looking to cut or save some money, this would be one that I think we could probably do a better job at.
Yeah, I just looked over at just even our restaurant and grocery combined bill. I mean, we're pretty close at approximately 15K. So, uh, to put that in perspective, I mean, sure, you're calling us 2x your number of mouths, but also three of our mouths are ages 7 and under. So,
Tiny
not the
bellies,
same.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're with groceries and food and drink, we're at, what is that, 22, 23,000? Yeah, 22,400. That's a lot on, and like I said, groceries does includes other things, so there's a little bit of fluff there, but overall, that's a lot just on food, and we've essentially solved for the other two categories in that we don't have a mortgage and we don't have car payments and don't intend to really ever have car payments in the future. Most of our transportation costs are very minimal at this point, but boy, we sure do spend on food.
Yep. Hey, I'm not one to criticize. I enjoy my food and beverage.
And I'm not a foodie though. We've talked about that before. Lori certainly is. She enjoys trying new things, and I get called out way too often for just being the boring guy who gets a cheeseburger or chicken nuggets. So I'm trying to do better at that, and which comes at a price.
Yeah, it's funny because when I eat at the office for lunch, I find myself, like one of our previous episodes, we talked about cheap and frugal, and I am cheap when it comes to eating at work. It is astronomical how much, theoretically some sort of, cafeteria food that theoretically I would guess that my employer is taking some of the cost of, but it surely doesn't seem like it. It's like I think there was a pastrami sandwich and something else, like a Reuben for, I mean, $10. Whereas I know that I can get a burger and onion rings for like 6.
Yeah.
I fall my like, even though it's $4, doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It really doesn't. If Ramit would say I'm focusing on the $3 question, not the $30,000 question, right? But yeah, I find myself being cheap when it comes to those lunches at work. So
And your overall like health might have some opinion on that. Like the $4, you may, and so in our case, I would say that we have been a lot more intentional with trying to eat a bit more healthy, and that comes at a cost as well. So even though we do the majority of our grocery shopping at Aldi, I mean, Lori, we watch a lot of, I don't know if you're familiar with, I think his name is Bobby Parrish. He has the app that's called Bobby Approved, where you scan it to try to find like, it's a thumbs up kind of thing, thumbs up, thumbs down. Is it healthy, not healthy, essentially? And we try to get the healthiest of items that we can. So like a loaf of bread, for example, is like, I don't know, $4 or $5, as opposed to $2 or $1.50 for the generic white bread.
sure.
But we're trying to eat healthier, which comes at a cost. So that's something that I don't think from a health standpoint, we're going to ever
Yeah,
try
go
to,
backwards.
yeah, go
Yeah.
backwards. Next category, real quick, is for bills and utilities. This one is pretty much right on what we expected it to be. It's mostly our insurances. So our homeowners insurance, our property insurance, our auto insurance, and then I put a note on here that we had two of our boys on our insurance, auto insurance, for a period of time this year, and they just paid us back for that. So some of that doesn't get captured in the the recouping of those funds on the credit card side. And then
What's that
shopping.
last sentence there?
Oh yeah, no more Prime. I forgot to call that out specifically. So just to touch on that for a second, you had mentioned that you cut your Prime, and when I ran that by Lori, she was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." So we actually didn't cancel it completely. We paused it. And that is essentially doing the same thing. We don't pay anything. It's keeping our account and all of our, I guess, if we had any downloads or anything like that, it would allow us to maintain ownership of those. But we didn't even do any of that anyway. But yeah, we've essentially canceled our Prime membership, which was 15 something dollars after taxes, 15 something a month, and 180 something dollars a year.
Yep. And for your own information, anything that you did buy as far as digital downloads, you do still keep the rights. So, like, my kids can still go watch the Minecraft movie that we purchased from Prime or whatever else. So,
Oh, is that with your, so did you fully cancel or did you
yeah, we
pause?
we fully canceled.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're just canceling stuff all over the place. We can talk
I
about
mean,
Facebook later.
yeah. What's the was it on I think it was an episode in Choose FI the guest brought up alligators and kittens.
Hmm.
Trying to remove those alligators.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've followed your lead. It's been pretty fun. I haven't fully canceled Facebook yet, but I could see that in my future. A couple other categories that were pretty big. So shopping, half of that was Amazon. The rest were like other household items. So things like Dollar General or I can't even think of what some of them were, but I don't think that's too crazy. It's 10%. Entertainment is a lot of concerts and things whenever we take our kids out and just doing things with our nephews, things like that, going to the movies, all that kind of stuff. Now, this one, car or auto gas, was $2,700 for the year, which I was like, I put in exclamation mark there. Wow, I was really surprised at how low that was. Like $230 a month total for us. We're still two gas guzzling cars here. Not really guzzling, but they're both fairly efficient. But we don't have anything electric, and that's really a benefit of working from home, me being early retired, so to speak. Even though I still get out and do plenty of things, and then Lori's just a 1 mile commute from work. But man, I remember back in the day, it was probably close to $1,000 a month in gas whenever we were both driving up to I was working in St. Louis City, she was working in St. Louis County. That was a huge chunk of our expenses, and then we that kept us from being able to do some of these other things. I would much rather go out and have dinner or go to a brewery and spend that money than to just put it in my gas tank and burn it up on back and
Ab-
forth to work.
Absolutely.
Home improvement category was pretty low. Automotive category was pretty low. Some of this was we got our windows tinted on both vehicles, and then the rest was just repairs and maintenance on my truck that I've talked about so many times on episodes in the past that it's older and I've had to replace a few things, but overall $1,600 for the year. Some of it was discretionary, some of it was maintenance, but I'm happy with that being 2.6%. I'll skip the rest of them, and the grand total was 64,000. So I on the previous slide I projected 71,000. We came in at 64. I know I'm missing a couple of things. So going back to bills and utilities, we spend approximately $325 a month on our utilities. So I'm talking gas for our home and electric and water. Those expenses we currently pay directly out of our checking account because the utility companies want to charge us, I don't know what it is, 3% or something like that. I'm curious what you do for your utilities or for any item like that that might charge a bit of a surcharge. Do you pay them directly from credit card or do you pay from your
I
checking
think
account?
generally it depends. In a lot of cases, yeah, we might just pay it directly from our checking account and avoid that difference, that 3% or whatever. I guess in some cases when we're playing the credit card game and trying to maximize for travel points and things like that, trying to meet min spend, we may on occasion change that. But there are certain companies that really don't like it, that it's kind of a pain to change it out. Is like
Hmm.
it seems to result in a delay, and then it's like, yeah, like you saw, like maybe I don't know who it is, but I'll use the example. If it was the electric company, and an electric company takes like a cycle and a half to catch up when you change your payment method, then yeah, for us, it's not worth trying to say like, oh yeah, it's gonna process correctly in April, then gonna get missed in May, and then in June we'll get like, you know, double charged, or they'll miss another month and then we'll get triple charged. You know, yeah. Some of them it's just not worth the hassle.
Yeah. So that's my spending now. If anybody is following along real closely, and we'll, we'll notice that on the previous page, I mentioned that I thought Lori's net income was going to be right around 50,000. So we spent 65,000 here plus another 4,000 or so for our utilities that we paid directly out of our checking account. So where is that money coming from? And I had projected that we were going to have some cash flow coming from our rental properties. And that's exactly what we did. It wasn't on a consistent monthly basis, but we did have a couple of times throughout the year that we took a owner distribution directly from the funds that we had saved in our rental property business accounts. And the way that we did that is, or the reason that we did that was whenever we would do any traveling, we would have those lumpy months. And then we would say, okay, this month we had, an extra $3,000 or $4,000, whatever it might have been. And then Lori would transfer that money from business, pay ourselves, and then distribute it from our checking account out to pay off that, debt or whatever it was. So it gets a little bit funky because if you were to look at our checking account, you would see that throughout the year we spent more money than what the overall total income was. And income, I'm saying income like just from the W-2 job, but that's kind of how we have done it. Now I want to be able to, as we go forward, have a clearer picture so that we can definitively say, oh, here's how much went in and out each month. And because, I mean, let's face it, if God forbid, if we were to get audited or something like that, we need to have some better documentation, at least I assume, than what we do now, where I'm just scrambling to try to even put something like this together for you. I mean, who knows what kind of questions could come our way that we would need to try to prove out or answer if we were in that kind of situation. So I'm glad that we did this exercise, and it's something that I want to do a better job at as we go forward.
Yeah. Maybe for people that aren't small business owners, do you want to explain the difference between a kind of that distribution and what would be like just normal W 2 income?
Yeah, so the W-2 income was just what came in from Lori's pay from her employer. And then the owner distribution would have been any positive cash flow that we had accrued in our rental property business. So when the tenant pays the rent, we set aside things for repairs and maintenance, of course, pay the mortgages and all the other expenses, the utilities and things like that that come along with owning the rental properties. And then we usually just let the majority of that money just continue to accrue in the business accounts until we either have a major expense. We kind of like separate it out into different buckets. And we haven't paid ourselves with any kind of regularity. In other words, we're not paying ourselves $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month in cash flow. We're just letting it accrue and build up in our business. And then as we need it, we're taking it out and labeling it as owner distribution.
Right. And yeah, I mean the same, like we're doing something. We were initially doing something very similar in Don's business, but we have started to take more of a regular distribution, much more like a salary, but it is important that those owner distributions are not viewed as a salary. And so there's some different tax considerations there as well.
Yeah, that's true. And I honestly cannot speak very clearly to that. And that's something, again, that I want to continue to get better at. I feel like the last decade or so of my life was all about accumulating and building and growing. And I didn't have as much time available, or maybe it was not so much time, but just interest in really like optimizing as much as I possibly could. So there was one of the things that I didn't speak to in here that I actually pulled out was our federal income taxes that we had to pay in 2025 for 2024. We won't have that big of a tax bill this year, but there was things that I know that I wasn't optimizing very well. And in having conversations with folks like Alan from our local group and some other folks whenever we went to economy this last year, I realized there was, money that I was leaving on the table because I wasn't capturing all of that stuff correctly. So I've continued to work at that and do a better job of bookkeeping and counting things as business expenses that I hadn't been in the past, such as the trip to economy. I'm counting that as a business expense because we learned a lot about how to optimize and improve our bookkeeping for small business. So that's, as I go forward, it's an evolution, right? It's a journey, continuing to grow and just find ways that we can continue to improve how we run that small business.
Yeah, makes sense.
Work on the business instead of in the business, right?
Absolutely. Well, Josh, do we have anything else that we want to talk about
I
before
don't
we
think so.
wrap this one?
Nope. This was fun, Elliot, and maybe we'll do it again sometime in 6 months or so, and we'll have a more, or at least I will have a more robust, better view of how we're doing things, and I can share what I've learned along the way.
Yeah, you and me both. All right. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, thanks for sticking around with us. Please like and subscribe on the platform that you're watching or listening to us on, whether that's Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, etc. Give us a comment, good, bad, or indifferent. We appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks, Elliot.
See ya.